Members, this is the appointed time and we have a quorum, so I call this meeting to order. We have 5 papers on the agenda. Before the meeting, the administration has submitted an information paper, ECI 2017-18, number 4, for members' circulation. This paper sets out the changes in the establishment of the directorate grade approved since 2002 and the implications concerned. I remind members that if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to items for discussion today, please, before you speak, disclose the nature of your interest in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure. I'd also like to remind members about the voting requirements where there is direct pecuniary interest in accordance with Rule 84 of the ROP. Item 1 relates to the judiciary. Members are invited to recommend to the FC the following proposals, including the creation of the following permanent judicial posts in the judiciary: 4 judges of the District Court JSPS 13 and 5 Deputy Registrar District Court JSPS 10, 4 Adjudicator of the Small Claims Tribunal JSPS 10, and 1 Magistrate JSPS 7 to 10. With immediate effect upon approval of the Finance Committee to enhance the establishment of judicial officers of the judiciary and also to create a supernumerary civil service post in the judiciary administration that is 1 principal executive officer for a period of around 3 years up to the 31st of March 2020 to provide support, directorate support. The administration consulted the AJLS panel on the proposal on the 24th of April 2017. And we have Ms. Emma Lau, Judiciary Administrator, Ms. Wendy Zhang, Deputy Judiciary Administrator Operations, and Mrs. Connie Ann, Assistant Judiciary Administrator Corporate Services, attending the meeting for this item. Dr. Priscilla Leung is chair of the AJLS panel, and she isn't here now, so I will highlight the salient points of discussion according to the information prepared by the Secretariat. The AJLS panel discussed this proposal on the 24th of April 2017. Members support the proposal to create these posts to cope with the increased workload of the West Kowloon Magistrates Court and the Small Claims Tribunal, which have been reprovisioned to West Kowloon Court building, and also the increasing workload of the Master's Office of the District Court, and also the estimated additional workload after the increased jurisdiction for civil claims in the Small Claims Tribunal has put in place. Mr. Alvin Young, well, we have no objection to the proposal. We're going to fully support the judiciary, but I also like to take this opportunity to ask a number of questions. First, in relation to the vacancy of judges. According to the Secretariat's information paper submitted to the subcommittee, including the Court of First Instance, the District Court, and also Magistrates Court, there are still some vacancies. So in relation to these unfilled vacancies, I'd like to know the position of the judiciary. We're not criticizing you, but we're concerned. We understand the difficulty in recruiting judges. So perhaps the judiciary can take this opportunity to explain to members the difficulties in the recruitment exercises to allay our concerns. Who will take the question? Ms. Lau. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Member, for the question. At the different levels of courts, indeed, there are vacancies of judicial posts, especially in relation to the Court of First Instance. As the Chief Justice said on a number of occasions, we faced certain difficulties in an open recruitment exercise. So we have 7 vacancies at the level of Court of First Instance which have not yet been filled. In light of this, the Chief Justice has implemented a number of measures, and he also closely monitored the situation. On the whole, we have a number of measures. For example, we conduct a review so that in the long term we would like to attract quality professionals to join the judiciary. And we also like to review on the existing measures in retaining talents in the judiciary. In terms of the review of the pay adjustment for the judges and judicial staff, with the support of the LegCo, we have implemented the new scale, and the next consultation in progress is to review the retirement age of judges and judicial officers. And we'd like to come up with recommendations to help attract talents and also retain talents. At the same time, we'll continue with the open recruitment exercise, and in the short term, we're also going to appoint deputy JJOs to cope with our manpower needs. In the district court, we completed an open recruitment exercise this year. On the whole, the recruitment of judges at the district council was quite satisfactory. Comparing to the magistrates court, at the end of 2016, we completed an open recruitment exercise, and it is still in progress. So in terms of open recruitment, retaining judges, and conducting reviews, these are the measures that we have implemented, along with our measure to extend the period of service of judges. We take the multi-pronged approach in meeting the manpower needs of the judiciary. Madam Chair, I note that according to the Secretariat's paper, for example, for specialized tribunals and magistrates' courts, there are 31 vacancies. And I'd like to know whether the vacancies have been reduced according to the according to the judiciary, because 31 out of 98 posts are quite substantial. Ms. Lau, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Member, for the question. At the magistracy level, at the moment, we conduct one open recruitment exercise once every 2 or 3 years. The latest recruitment exercise began in the end of 2016, and it is still in progress. I believe that upon conclusion of this recruitment exercise, there will be more magistrates appointed, and definitely the vacancies will be reduced. Madam Chair, a follow-up question. In relation to this open recruitment exercise of magistrates, roughly when will this exercise end, or is it going to continue until all vacancies have been filled up? Ms. Lau. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Member, for the question. The recruitment exercise will be completed very shortly. As to whether the vacancies can be filled, it depends on whether we have the appropriate candidates to fill the vacancies, because the Chief Justice have emphasized a number of times that in selecting JJOs, one important criterion is to appoint only the quality candidates. Next, Mr. Martin Liao. Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the creation of the 14 permanent judicial posts, and also the creation of the supporting posts, including one PEO. But my question is not directly related to this. Still, I think it's relevant. About the feasibility of the locations chosen as the judiciary's office, I like the judiciary to explain the progress to us, so that for the creation of the supernumerary post of PEO, the process can begin before 2020. Thank you for your question. We're actively discussing with the administration. In the process, of course, the location is important, and we've also considered in the discussion process any new location proposed by the administration, whether in the long term in the court buildings the judiciary can meet the existing demand, and also to plan for the demand in the coming decades. And we discuss not only the principles, we also discuss specific details and our future plans, and we're actively discussing the matter with the administration. And the administration will make an announcement when time is ripe. But I can only tell the honourable member that we're actively taking this up, and we hope that gradually we can have some progress.
Do you think the exercise can be completed in the near future? Thank you very much for the question. The judiciary has to work with the government on this. In our past collaborations, apart from our own efforts, the relevant government units also sought to work hard, so we are optimistic, but it would eventually depend on the government's efforts. Any other questions? No. Next, Mr. Yu Si-wing. Thank you. Recently, the police announced Hong Kong's crime situation, and there has been a substantial improvement. And the crime rate went down by 8.7% in 2016 compared with the year before. Since the handover, it was a year in which Hong Kong performed the best in terms of crime, and so the burden on manpower should be relatively lightened. Of course, we are not just looking at crime rate, but has the judiciary analyzed whether part of the manpower burden could be alleviated? And if so, what would be the arrangements in terms of internal manpower deployment? With a lower crime rate, would the burden on judiciary officers be lightened? The judiciary works on both civil and criminal matters. At the courts level, we are relatively passive. In the criminal aspect, for prosecution cases, we realize that the trends of different types of crimes have been relatively stable, and at magistrates' courts, in terms of summonses and fines, the number of cases has went up. So in terms of the overall number of criminal cases, especially at magistrates' courts, there is a rising trend. But the workload of our JJOs do not just depend on the number of cases. We have to consider the complexity of the cases and various considerations. In recent years, we have seen more and more complicated cases. For civil cases, this is rather irrelevant to prosecutions. The number of civil cases has been more or less stable, or with a slight increase. And in some cases, they are related to our economic cycle. And again, in recent years, we realize that cases have become more and more complicated. So the caseload has not decreased, but the cases have become more and more complicated. So that has created a burden on our judges and JJOs. We would assess the manpower needs at different levels and make deployments accordingly. At district courts, we realize that the workload of the family court has become heavier. So in terms of civil cases, more resources might be deployed to deal with family cases. So manpower deployments are normal given the fluctuations in workload. Chairman, after the creation of these posts, will the creation make any difference in the actual needs, or would this be a regular post-creation exercise? Ms. Lau? We review the establishment of judicial offices regularly. The last time we proposed creation was 2013, so it has been 3 or 4 years. When we see new needs, we would make such proposals. And in our paper, we have outlined the increase in workload. And we will adjust the civil jurisdictional limits of the district courts as well as the small claims tribunal. That's why we made such proposal. Thank you. Next, Ms. Odin Chow. Thank you. I support the creation of these JJO posts by the judiciary. And within the legal sector, we have discussed the shortage of JJO staff for quite some time, and we do need more staff to deal with the increasing caseload and complexity of the cases. I have a few questions. For the SCT, 2 new adjudicators would be hired. And in the past, the jurisdictional limits at the SCT used to be $50,000, and now the limit has been raised to $75,000. And according to the paper, more cases could be handled for the benefit of the public. And the move to the West Kowloon Magistrates Courts is also positive, or the West Kowloon Law Courts Building. Would there be a regular review to see whether the 2 new adjudicators can meet the new demand at the SCT, or whether additional staff would be required? And in the next stage, would the civil jurisdictional limit be raised from $75,000 to $100,000? As for the creation of 1 principal executive officer post to deal with the reprovisioning of the West Kowloon Magistrates Courts and SCT, the post would last till 2020. In other words, for around 3 years. How about the reprovisioning arrangements of the High Court and District Courts? Do you have a blueprint leading up to 2020? Can you give us a blueprint of your plans leading to 2020? Ms. Lau? For the SCT, we hope that the jurisdictional limits can be raised by early 2018, and after that we will monitor the situation. Our current estimation on caseload is based on our figures for the past few years. But for the SET, we would consider whether there would be suppressed demand and whether more people might take out claims at the SET. We will monitor the situation and conduct reviews accordingly. We should adopt a prudent approach and take things step by step. After the new limit of $75,000 is put in place, we would monitor the actual operation and caseload as well as complexity of the cases to see whether they can be dealt with at the SET. And as members know, there are no counsels at the SET in litigations. So we would consider different factors before deciding whether there will be other measures. We will certainly conduct regular reviews. As for the reprovisioning of the High Court and District Courts, the creation of this supernumerary post is just the first step. This is a special project. That's why we felt that a supernumerary post would be more appropriate. In the next 3 years, our goal is to come up with a blueprint for both projects. And after the first stage, we will consider whether there's still a need for such posts, and we will propose to LegCo by then. Dr. Helena Wang. Good morning. The Democratic Party supports the proposed creation of these posts by the Judiciary. And the paper talked about the extra workload at the West Kowloon Law Courts building, but I'd like to know whether all the 14 new posts would be stationed at the WKLCB. The answer is no. Three of these 14 new posts would be located at the WKLCB, and including 2 magistrates and 1 adjudicator, and the 2 masters posts. Since we already have 2 deputy registrars, so there will be 2 new posts at the DC Master's office. For the 2 DC judges, is there any designated court or location for them? The 4 new proposed DC judges will deal with the civil cases at the DC level. The 4 new judges will specifically deal with the civil cases, and the civil jurisdictional limit of the DC will be raised from 1 million to 3 million in our proposal. So the new judges will deal with civil matters. For the Lands Tribunal, there are 4 adjudicators, so will the creation of these posts facilitate their work as well? As I know, the Lands Tribunal has to deal with cases involving tenants and owners as well as buildings, redevelopment of old buildings, etc. the false auctions have not been dealt with, and they have to wait 1 or 2 years. So I'd like to know whether the creation of these posts would facilitate their work as well. Is there any indicator or service target? And would you review whether there's a shortage of manpower at the Lands Tribunal? Ms. Lau, thank you very much. The establishment review does not include the Lands Tribunal. The manpower situation of the LT is in line with the establishment. At various district courts and tribunals, we do have service pledges or indicators, and the time required for our cases largely meet our target. And the management of the relevant courts would review the manpower situation of different courts, and they might make short-term deployments if necessary. For instance, if the Lands Tribunal faces a large number of cases, the district judges might make manpower deployments as necessary.
So there are KPIs. I'd like the administration to give me information of the indicators for the district court, families court, and the tribunals, etc., so that we understand the situation. Are the performance pledges available online? For the listing time, every year in the controller's report submitted to the Finance Committee, we set out the relevant time, and it's also available online. But perhaps you can give us the information. Yes, I'll be happy to do so. Thank you. Mr. Ray Chan. Thank you, Madam Chair. Insufficient judges and the judicial officers in the Judiciary is a matter close to the heart of the subcommittee, and every time they ask for creation of posts, we would support the proposals. And even for the Special Finance Committee, we would suggest that you ask for more resources. But it seems that you have exercised some self-restraint. I don't know whether it has to do with the challenge in the open recruitment exercise, or is it that because of the size of your establishment, you cannot increase manpower substantially? My first question has to do with masters at the district court. According to the paper, starting from 2008, over the years, the caseload have increased substantially, but the establishment has remained the same, and you have provided some figures. Now, I'd like to know the difficulty in obtaining comprehensive statistics on a number of areas. Is it because the figure is too huge that you dare not mention it? For example, the number of paper applications, no comprehensive statistics information, and also the number of cases with either parties or all parties being litigants in persons has also increased, and yet you do not have a detailed statistical breakdown. I'd like to know why. Ms. Lau. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Member, for the questions. We exercise prudence and pragmatism in using our resources. In relation to DC Master's Office, at the moment, we do not have a comprehensive information technology management policy. As such, much information is handled manually. So in terms of the flow of hearings of important cases, we do have statistics available in the system, whereas for some cases involving manual procedures, I hope members would understand that when it comes to statistics, the procedure is complex, and it also adds to the administrative burden of the judiciary. And we therefore have made this choice For important indicators, we have included them in the system so that we have statistics available. But when it comes to details of day-to-day operation involving manual operations, we do not have comprehensive statistical breakdown. As for the DC Master's Office at the District Court, the number of cases with parties being litigants in person amounts to 60%, if I remember correctly. So the masters at the District Court also need more time to explain the hearing procedure and the procedure of interlocutory proceedings. So before we create more posts in the establishment, what we do is to appoint deputy judges at the district court, and that is, we have 2 deputy registrars working there at the moment that would like to regularize the practice. Now, Madam Chair, I'm not trying to put pressure on the judiciary's workload by citing statistics. I just like to know the allocation of resources, because we always ask the police to give us information on the cases involving dishonest use or using computers with dishonest intent. And let's say if there's been an increase of 200%, then having 2 more posts will not solve the problem, and that's the intention of my question. As for the 3-year time-limited supernumerary posts, what should the PEO achieve in the 3-year period? Do you have any indicator? Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chen, for your question. Let me supplement the answer to the first question. We have 2 deputy registrars at the moment, which should meet the demand. At the moment, as for the 3-year time-limited supernumerary post, there are different stages of a large project. So in terms of the choice of accommodation, a lot of design and planning is necessary, and we also need to take up advanced works, including design and tendering. We hope that when it comes to the preparatory stage, we hope that in a 3-year period we can make some progress. Ms. Eunice Yong. Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the proposal of the judiciary to create judicial posts, and I have the following questions. We talked about the family court and district council, district court. We understand that the court, we have 6 courtrooms of the family court dealing with tens of thousands of cases every year, and space is limited when it comes to rooms and waiting rooms for the parties. So in terms of the PEO post, apart from the existing accommodation, apart from the new accommodation, will you consider enhancing the use of space in existing premises? And also about registrars at the district court, I understand that the workload is really heavy, because in my line of work, I also understand that judges are required to take up case management. Every time I see cases, I see judges carrying bundles of papers that the judge is required to read through, but when the case comes to the hands of another judge, the other judge will need to read through this again. I wonder if you increase manpower, and also for the jurisdictional limit, it will be increased from 1 million to 3 million for civil claim at the district court. I want to know whether the proposed creation of posts can meet this increased demand. Ms. Lau. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Yong, for the questions. Regarding family court, at the moment it is true that manpower is tight and space is limited. So apart from long-term accommodation measures, we also have short-term measures. Of course, we'd like to reprovision the Families Court, Small Claims Tribunal, the Lands Tribunal in one go to meet the future demand. Whereas, meanwhile, we have some ideas in mind. The PEO post will deal with the issue. Well, that's because when the Small Claims Tribunal has been reprovisioned to the West Kowloon Court buildings, the space, meaning the 4th and the 5th floor of the Wan Chai Law Courts building, are now vacated. And we're actively pursuing plans to convert the space into additional courtrooms, other facilities, and judges' offices or chambers for a number of purposes. Namely, we provide extra space for use by the judges at the family court and the users, and we also provide additional facilities for the use by district court after the jurisdictional limit has been increased from 1 million to 3 million, since there will be additional registrars or masters to deal with the cases. And this is an ongoing exercise. The other question is on information technology. I mentioned that in terms of the use of information technology, we are exploring different overall proposals, and grateful to the Finance Committee for the funding approval. We have now an update exercise of the 6-year plan of information technology and a comprehensive case management for the judiciary. And we're going to roll out the plan in district court, the civil courts of the district court first, because the plan will be rolled out in phases. And our first phase is district courts, civil courts, so that in terms of efficiency and the management of information technology, we hope to facilitate users. And we believe that some improvements will be made. As to your final question, after the jurisdictional limit has been increased from $1 million to $3 million for the district court, we have conducted an exercise. That is, we considered the cases in the past at the district court involving claims of 1 million to 3 million at the High Court, and the category of cases, and after implementing the increased jurisdictional limit, how many of these cases will be transferred to the district court, and on this basis, we project the manpower needed. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Well, according to the paper, there are quite there is quite a big percentage of vacancies. Of course, I support the proposal to create more JJO posts to cope with the caseload. But in light of so many JJO vacancies, I want to know whether this is the only solution, or is there any plan to fill the vacancy so as to address the issue of insufficient JJOs? And that's the first question. Second question. The jurisdictional limit will be increased, and I'd like to know when it will be implemented. And about the scope of cases and the ceiling proposed, what is the basis? For example, the district court will have its jurisdictional limit increased from 1 million to 3 million. I'd like to know on what basis this increase is proposed, because for Small Claims Tribunal, the limit will be raised from 50,000 to 75,000. These two increases don't seem to be consistent. and also for the adoption of IT in the case management or the management of judicial affairs. Well, where necessary, please submit your proposal to the LegCo. I believe members will support you. Finally, after increasing the establishment of JJOs, I'd like to know more about the supporting staff, and also whether the supporting staff will help the public, as we have more and more litigants appearing in person in the cases, and if these persons are not represented, they may need to rely on frontline judicial staff such as clerks. They may need to help with explaining the forms and help fill out the forms. So when you increase the number of JJOs, will you also enhance training and increase the size of supporting staff so that unrepresented litigants may also be assisted in filling in forms?
Ms. Lau, thank you very much for the question. On the first question, for our DC judges, adjudicators, and CFI judges, we carry out open recruitment, and this is something we will continue. In the past, we had difficulties recruiting CFI judges. The reason was there were relatively few qualified candidates, but we will continue with open recruitment nonetheless. And as the Chief Justice has said, we will carry out long-term review to see how we can appeal better to talents from the legal sector as well as retaining talents. And there are two areas to our work. First is to improve the remuneration and benefits package for judges, and they have been implemented this April. Another aspect of the review is still ongoing, and that is to review the retirement age of JJOs at different levels. Hopefully the review would be completed very soon, and results would be submitted to the government. As for the basis for increasing the civil jurisdictional limits, we did consider various factors, including economic factors, given the increased workload at the DC and SCT, we would assess whether their present manpower levels are adequate. After increasing the limits, would the public have better means to justice? So we have considered all these factors. In terms of information technology, we would like to thank LegCo for granting us the funds to carry out an IT program a few years ago. As for hiring extra judges, we would also hire extra supporting staff. And every year in the budget, we will propose increase in supporting staff if necessary to LegCo and the government. We focus on quality services, but at the judiciary, we have an important principle. We are independent and neutral, and we have to maintain such image. When the public requires legal advice, the judiciary cannot provide it, but we will refer the public to the right organizations. Dr. N. Chang, thank you. We will create 5 posts of Deputy Registrar at the District Court. Paragraph 12 of the paper mentioned that the DC Master's Office will be responsible for all the business and exercising all the authority that may be exercised by a DJ in chambers. I'd like to know what all the business refers to. Different JJOs would enjoy different rights according to the law. And the deputy registrars can exercise all the business and duties empowered by the law. Can you give us some examples? You said the judges are becoming more and more busy these days, and they require supporting staff. Would the deputy registrars help the judges? According to paragraph 12b of the paper, it says transacting all the business and exercising all the authority and jurisdiction that may be exercised by a DJ. So does it include research work? Ms. Lau. At the district court, we have a master's system, and we sometimes call the deputy registrars masters. They are not involved in hearings proper, but in civil proceedings, and in the entire process there would be a number of non-interlocutory hearings, and sometimes they need to seek instructions from the courts, and they have to deal with written applications which do not require hearings. So these are some of the duties carried out by the masters. So what does masters actually mean? So in Chinese we call it 领案官, but in English we call them masters. For civil matters, whether for the district court or high court, before the hearings proper, they have to go through different procedures, and the masters will help facilitate these procedures so that judges can focus on the proper trials. We are creating a number of new posts. If the deputy registrars would not help the judges in research, etc., who can help the judges? So, and the masters are not responsible for that as well. Is that correct? Perhaps I would clarify myself. These are just different terms. Masters are also JJOs. They are not assistants to the judges. And as we said in our paper, masters are on the same level as adjudicators and magistrates. They would be responsible for non-interlocutory hearings and the relevant written applications. So masters have similar tasks as judges, but they are on different levels. Without these masters, what would happen? We have masters already, but if we do not have enough of them, the waiting times would get longer and longer. In other words, the litigants would have to wait a very long time. So that is a possible consequence. Dr. N. Chang, 4 minutes, please. Judges are very busy and they have a lot to get through. Would any of the posts support research work for the judges? So which JJOs would be responsible for these tasks? Thank you very much. Right now, at different levels of court, from magistrates' courts to DC or High Court, there would be clerks as well as proper support staff for judges. In recent years, for judges at the higher courts, the need for dedicated support staff is getting higher and higher. That's why we have judges' assistants at the High Court and Court of Final Appeal. At the CFA, we have judges' assistants to deal with research work, and at the High Court, for the criminal court, we have judges' assistants, and for civil matters, we also have assistants to the judges. We introduced these a few years ago, and we would continue to review the system. And they have been the system has been operating well at the High Court level, so we will monitor the developments. We see the greatest needs at the High Court and above. Judges are very busy, so they do require a lot of support. So I think it's right to hire more officers. We read from the news that when judges make decisions, they might need to refer to the legislative intent as well as the relevant meeting papers. So reading these materials require a lot of effort, and judges might not find time for that. So are they being given support in terms of this area? Judges would exercise their independent judgment, and I would not comment on that on the grounds of judicial independence. So I'd just like to know whether there are supporting staff. For legislative intent, judges would make their own judgments. Ms. Lau, the judges would exercise their jurisdictional powers, and I would not comment on that on the grounds of judicial independence. In the civil system, counsels from both sides would often cite their grounds to the judge, and the judge would make a judgment, and I would not comment on that. Chairman, sometimes you need to understand the legislative intent. Dr. Chang, of course, that is the case. So for cases involving legislative intent, they are usually taken to the Court of Final Appeal rather than the levels of court we are discussing today. And at that level, the judges would have a judgment for themselves. And Judge Andrew Lee had a lot of such cases, which I can share with you later. I think Dr. Chang just wants to ask whether the judges have to consider legislative intent. As for the matters discussed at the panel, at LegCo panels or bills committees, at the CFI or CFA, the judges will, of course, deal with those. I don't think that's relevant to the creation of posts we are discussing today. I believe that the 14 judicial posts would be filled by open recruitment. The answer is yes. Under our existing policy, the JJOs at the 3 levels of court would be filled by open recruitment, and the 14 posts fall under these 3 levels. After we approve the creation of these posts, they should be filled up soon. Is that right? Thank you very much. The CFI often face the greatest difficulties in recruitment, but they are not part of this exercise. And at the district court level, recruitment has been relatively smooth, so we are optimistic. A member of public has a question he wants to ask. Would how many of the judges used to be government counsels?
Well, we have provided statistics before in our past recruitment exercises, how many of the candidates came from practicing lawyers and barristers, and how many of them are government counsel, and I can give you this information. And also about the footnote under paragraph 40 in the paper, it refers to the 40 unfilled directorate, JJO post, etc. Well, I understand that you have a regular recruitment cycle, let's say once every 6 months, and if recruitment is successful, so be it. But if the recruitment is not successful, what happens? And about the 11 special magistrates posts, etc., does it mean that if the recruitment exercise is unsuccessful, you will think of alternatives? Ms. Lau, we have a regular recruitment cycle. In the past few years, the CFA judges have decided to hold recruitment exercises more frequently for High Court judges, whereas for the District Court and the Magistrates Court, the number of candidates may be larger, and once every 2 or 3 years a recruitment exercise may be held because of the larger pool. And I'd like to explain to members that although we have some vacancies unfilled, we also make use of the deputy JJO system. As of the 1st of June this year, we have 35 deputy JJOs, and they come from the private legal sector. So we do have a deputy system to maintain our operation. Third round, Dr. N. Chang. Madam Chair, I hope that you won't say that I am digressing, because this is the Establishment Subcommittee, and we are discussing this proposal to create more JJO posts. As the paper suggests, more support should be given. So I'd like to know more about supporting staff, coupled with the fact that there are media reports today, and I can't help but think that we have debates in this council on bills, and we also scrutinize the bills very carefully, and we also exchange our views in numerous meetings. So we're very clear about the intention of the bills, but then According to the newspaper, someone queried that if a judge doesn't refer to the legislative intent of the bill or doesn't refer to the LegCo's discussion on the bill, then what should be done. And we don't want the legislature to be more superior to the judiciary. Then that is why I raise my question in light of the proper support to be given to JGOs. I just want to air my views and ask my questions, and I'd like to respond, and I'd like to have a response in the future. Does it mean that the judge will not pay any attention to the electoral papers or the discussions on the bill? Well, I totally agree with your point of view, Dr. N. Chang, but my understanding is that to understand the legislative intent of the bill, the most important reference for the judge is the administration's response at the resumption of a second reading debate. That is, after the administration has incorporated the views of members, because we might have added a lot of views in the process of scrutinizing the bill, but not all views may be incorporated by the administration into the bill. Ms. Lau. Judges exercise judicial independence in presiding over cases. As far as our legal system is concerned, we are open, and the judgment handed down will clearly set out the grounds of the judge's ruling. As for cases about the level of district council, all the judgments are uploaded online for public access. Please give me 20 seconds, Madam Chair. I respect judicial independence, but it means free from interference outside. It doesn't mean independent judgment by the judge without any regard to the views of the Legislative Council and the legislative intent of the bill. At council meetings, it is important to make reference to the public officers' speeches, but we should not forget the effort made by members of a Bills Committee. They have put a lot of questions to the administration to clarify matters, and the administration also responds to members. And if in future a judge doesn't need to have regard to the discussion at the Bills Committee, I don't agree, because our discussion is very important. I don't have any political motive. I'm just here as a council member. I just want to make things clear. Well, if you just say that this is judicial independence, and if you're so independent, you wouldn't need to come and ask for funding, and that's it. Next member, Mr. Alvin Yeo. Madam Chair, I understand that some members of this subcommittee are very concerned about how judgment is handed down and what is or whether a judge has made reference to the views of the council. I fully understand the member's concern, but I'd like to explain to the member that for the majority of cases, we have the plaintiff or the defendant, or the prosecution and the defendant, and in the process, both parties will submit cases for the judge's perusal, and the judge will also be considered to consider the legal arguments. And in some cases, both parties may find it necessary to invite the judge to refer to discussions in the Legislative Council, and such a suggestion would be would be dealt with, and when it comes to the legislative intent and discussions in the legislative process, whether these discussions are relevant to the case, in an open court hearing, both parties would be allowed a chance to discuss, and where necessary, a judge can put questions to either party. So it is not a rigid rule, and it is not a rule of thumb that each case must take into account the legislative intent of the bill. And perhaps we're talking about more complex cases of public interest in which the legislative discussion of the bill may be considered. It may not apply to all the cases, and if necessary, both parties will be engaged in a discussion. So I agree with the Judiciary Administrator that all cases are open to the public, and if the lower courts commits an error, then either party can appeal for the higher court to consider whether there is any omission or any error on the part of the presiding judge. So this provides confidence for us in our legal system, and it also guarantees that no legal points or legal arguments neglected by lower court will continue to be omitted, so that all points that should be covered in a discussion in the court can be covered, if not by a lower court, then by a higher court. That's all I wish to supplement. Ms. Lau, anything to add? Nothing to add. And I agree with the appeal mechanism mentioned by Mr. Alvin Yeung. This is also a crucial element in our judicial system. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. First round. It's the first round. Sorry. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Sip. First of all, I just came back from the High Court. I am involved in the case of criminal contempt of court, and the judiciary has a huge responsibility or burden for a civil injunction. The DOJ is suggesting that it should be enforced in a criminal proceeding. So it is really amazing. Of course, in the short term, you won't have sufficient manpower. Any abuse of the legal system will cause strain in the resources in the judiciary. That's for sure. In the long term, well, Dr. Anne Chang, well, I seldom hear her speak 3 times. I think in the long term we need to have a constitutional court, because you are incorporating all discussions on constitutional matters in the judicial system. If you ask 1 judge or 2 judges to preside over such a case, well, let's say a JJO used to be just a small potato, but the JJO has been promoted all the way, and I witnessed that. And now he's the expert. I think when it comes to our judicial system, there should be an independent court that deals with the basic law or the constitutional matters. Otherwise, there is a succession problem. You're mixing everything up. Mr. Justice Au, he presides over all sorts of cases, cases involving property and our cases, etc. I don't think you have sufficient resources. Mr. Alvin Yeung said that he believes in the hardware, but even if we have hardware, we don't have the software. We're using something like a 286 computer or CPU to process things, and it's very slow. Imagine back in the days without Google, how did we look for search for anything? So I think that there should be a comprehensive review of our judicial system, because in terms of checks and balances and the relationship between the legislature and the administration and the public and the administration, we need you as the third party to exercise checks and balances. Some say that they have confidence in you. We need to have software, meaning manpower. We need to have hardware, meaning court buildings and the law. And I think that the administration has taken courts as rubber stamps, as a political tool. So they take political cases to court, and you need to increase manpower. It's becoming more and more confusing because we have touched upon the legislative intent. As for the U.S. laws, they originated from the discussions 200 years ago. And one of the 9 Supreme Court judges have died, and they're having a very heated debate on whether the next judge to be appointed should be a Republican or a Democrat. Well, I think that it's a waste of time to suggest that a judge is politically neutral. He may not hold strong views on politics, but he does have some strong views on the legal system and the rule of law.
Europe has a human rights court, and the U.S. has a constitutional court, and clear options are presented to the various parliaments, but we have no such thing. I was detained, and I had to apply for an order. 26 people were detained, and we had to seek a protection order in order to leave. So where's the dignity for our courts? Members, we are discussing 5 papers today. We have spent an hour and 15 minutes on this. We have a number of wider issues with regards to judicial issues, and I think the discussion should end here. Dr. An Chang, 4th round. Apart from legislative intents, do you have other questions? Just now, Elvin Young said there's an appeals mechanism. So at the CFA, the judges will consider legislative intents. That's what he said. Chairman, for any cases, I think at the initial trial, they should consider legislative intent and LegCo papers. If we wait until the CFA, how long would the litigations last, and how much would the public have to pay? So even lawyers need to speak with some sense. So I have nothing much to add. I hope the government has heard me, and at the preliminary trials, they should refer to LegCo's legislative intents and all relevant papers. If you are to refer to the information anyway, why don't you do it earlier? That way you won't be wasting the money of the litigants. Ms. Lau, anything to add? At what levels would you look at legislative intent? I cannot comment on how judgments are made. I think that's all. I think we can end the discussion on legislative intent here. This is not a time for debate. We should be vetting the papers. Elvin Young, for personal issues or questions about legislative intent. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. The judges cannot proactively cite the basic law unless both counsels or either of the counsels make such argument. So have some common sense. At lower courts, for example, tribunals or magistrates' courts, if it's being argued, the judges have to do their jobs. I won one such case, and the applicant, the government applied for an injunction in an abuse of power. So Dr. Chang, it's certainly debatable whether or not there will be an appeal is another issue. Judges often cite provisions in the basic law, so that is the job of the legal aid department. The LAD should lower the threshold of assistance for litigations involving the Constitution, and I was often a victim, and they said I am paid or I am receiving a salary, but I was debating something that concerns all Hong Kong people. You know, Holden Chow, you should stop her. Well, that's a request by myself. He can choose not to listen. We often talk about legislative intent. According to the basic law, for CFA decisions that are related to the mainland, then they can seek an interpretation of the law. The basic law is very complicated. So how can we ask the judges to take this up? So there must be dedicated a dedicated system, and we need dedicated staff to deal with the basic law. If you have unlimited resources, of course, I wouldn't mind. People talk about the basic law committee or other committees. The basic law committee would explain the issues, and Dr. Chang apparently does not know about the existence of this committee. This is a waste of time. No, Xi Jinping is gone, so he asks you to accurately understand the basic law. Now you know nothing about the provisions, you know nothing about the reality, and well, Mr. Leung, as I said, the debate on legislative intent should end here. We should enhance legal aid, and we should have more courtrooms or court buildings. The courts are passive, and I'm just a part of the public. Now, if I'm arrested as a member of the public rather than a legislator. Well, I'm going to give you the funds. Just give us a list of new court buildings. Your time's up. I think today you cannot talk about the LAD. It belongs to the executive. We have been discussing legislative intent for quite some time. It's not your turn, Mr. Leung. The clerk reminded me that according to Rule 41(8) of the Rules of Procedure, we can discuss general issues, but we cannot discuss the or comments on the behaviors of JJOs, including the judges. We cannot comment whether their judgments are correct. Any other questions? Dr. Yu Chung Yim. First round, followed by Mr. Ray Chen, third round. Does any other member have questions? We are behind schedule and we have a few more papers to go through. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, third round. Anyone else? I have to draw the line here. We must adjourn at 12:30. Dr. Edward Yu, first round. Mr. Ray Chan, third round. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, third round. Dr. K.K. Kwok, first round. First, Dr. Edward Yu, 5 minutes. Thank you. In paragraph 29 of the paper, the creation of a supernumerary PEO post was mentioned. Before discussion at the Finance Committee, I'd like to see more information. Is this post related to the planning or management of the new law courts building? So it's somewhat related to my constituency in terms of architecture and facilities maintenance. Can you tell us more about the professional qualifications required of this post? And in footnote 3, on the 1st of February 2012, this post was already created through transfer of powers. And that transfer led to a freeze in the post of a chief magistrate or principal magistrate. So can you explain what led to such inconsistency of the posts? First of all, we felt that a PEO post is necessary or appropriate because the PEO has to take up management and coordination work together with other professionals. Professionals also play a key role in our project or plans. So in this team, we have created a supernumerary architect post at the Architectural Services Department, and that post has been seconded at the Judiciary. And the DPEO has to work with other government departments such as the RCSC and Planning Department. So the PEO cannot do everything. But we feel that the PEO is more experienced in various aspects of management. But then the PEO has to work with other professional grades. In the judiciary, we froze 2 posts of principal magistrates. We used to have a number of magistrates courts, and now at each magistracy there's a principal magistrate post. In the past 10 years, we closed down certain magistrates courts, and as such 2 of the posts of principal magistrates were frozen. We are able to resume one such post because the financial resources are available to pay the salaries of a principal magistrate. Apart from long-term planning, there are also work in the short term. For example, the works at the 4th and 5th floors of the Wan Chai Law Building. After the approval of this post, you said you could resume the frozen post. So, what are your plans, Ms. Lau? If this post is approved, then it would be made regular, and the post of principal magistrate could be resumed. And in the future, the post might be resumed at the West Kowloon Law Courts building. It's a relatively large building. The number of courtrooms and workload are higher than other law courts buildings. So in the future, the WKLCB might need 2 principal magistrates. So hopefully more information can be provided.
I can put the information I just provided in writing. Dr. K.K. Kwok. The paper proposes to create posts for the district court, the small claims tribunal, and the magistracy. I don't have any objection to that, but in relation to the district court, small claims tribunal, and the magistrates court, we do have quite a huge backlog of cases. So why aren't we deploying more resources to deal with those instead of deploying resources to the registrar's office? Now, I understand the explanation given in the paper on DC Master's office, but we need to take a targeted approach. We need more judges presiding over cases. So, is it possible to delete some registrar's posts so that more resources can be deployed to judges? Very often I read from the administration's paper about difficulty in attracting new candidates or retaining talents in the judiciary. Now, I think that what the administration proposes is false about freezing the principal magistrate's post. Well, you want to attract legal talents to join the judiciary, but why are you at the same time freezing 2 posts, which is contrary to the existing policy? Ms. Lau. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Kwok, for your question. When we proposed to increase manpower at the district court, we proposed to increase to create posts for judges as well as registrars. That is because after increase in the jurisdictional limit, we propose to increase for the 4 judges and 3 registrars, having regard to the case list in the judiciary. And after increasing the civil jurisdictional limit from $1 million to $3 million in 2018, based on our experience, we project how many cases would be passed from the High Court to the District Court and how many cases would be taken up by District Court judges and registrars respectively. So there is demand for these 2 posts. And I'd like to stress that for civil cases, sometimes the cases will be settled or dealt with at the interlocutory stage. So based on these points I mentioned, we project the resources needed for different posts before coming up with this proposal. And that is why we propose to create 4 posts of judges of the district court and 5 deputy registrars of the district court. 2 are permanent posts to cope with the existing workload, and 3 are for coping with the future workload. Of course, once implemented, we need to review whether it is in line with our projection. I just want to explain to members that the criteria we base our proposal on. I think that we're talking about different matters. We talked about freezing the 2 principal magistrate posts, but this is not against our policy. Instead, we take a pragmatic approach. We put the operational needs first, because in the past, you may recall that we had 10 magistracies, and now we have 7 magistrates courts. And in the past decade or so, through streamlining of procedures and reprovisioning of law courts, we have consolidated the magistracy. So in terms of the operational need, there is a decrease, but we also consider that in the future there may be operational need, and we may need to unfreeze these 2 posts. As I mentioned just now, there are 32 law courts with 13 civil courts and 20 criminal courts in the West Kowloon Law Courts building, and we anticipate that in the near future, 1 principal magistrate in the West Kowloon Law Courts building may not be sufficient, or we may need to unfreeze 1 post. So the focus is on operational need. Madam Chair, I'd like to add that for the PEO post, it has a time limit of 3 years. So does it mean that after the lapse of the 3-year time-limited post, you will delete this post and then unfreeze the post of principal magistrate so that you can recruit a judicial officer? With the support of the Legislative Council, this post, which has been unfrozen, would be frozen again. And once the PEO 3-year term has expired, then we will seek approval from the Establishment Subcommittee and the Finance Committee for an extension of the supernumerary posts. 3rd round, Mr. Ray Chan. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to pick up on the last point I mentioned in the footnote of paragraph 40. For the 40 unfilled vacancies, according to Ms. Emma Lau, these posts are currently filled up by deputy JJOs appointed from outside the judiciary. I'd like to know why you adopt this deputy system instead of formally appointing JJOs. Is it that the terms are different? Ms. Lau. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chan, for your questions. For permanent posts in the judiciary, we need to go through the open recruitment exercise. But one feature of the legal sector is that for legal professionals to join the judiciary as a long-term career, it is a very important decision that requires careful consideration. Because if a legal professional joins the district council or the high court, a district court or the high court as a judge or registrar, he must undertake not to rejoin the private profession. That is why a candidate must consider very carefully before joining the judiciary. So in the judiciary, we have deputies from outside the judiciary, and they may apply to the judiciary, and if the Chief Justice is satisfied that he is a suitable candidate, he can join the judiciary as a JJO to acquire some experience. And there are also other categories of deputy JJOs. For example, we have an internal arrangement. Let's say a judge of the district court can take up a post in the high court as a deputy judge, which is some sort of an acting appointment. We also have retired judges taking up deputy posts where there is operational need to deal with our caseload. So there are different categories of deputy JJOs. The third round, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. The post of principal magistrate is frozen because of the closure of magistracies, meaning that there is no court for the principal magistrate to work in. So, had it not been the case that you needed to recruit a PEO, then let's say the Chief Justice of the Court of Final Appeal then believes that we should recruit somebody to do with the accommodation and facilities in the judiciary. Now, my question is whether you think that the judges are facing a huge workload in the moment, because I think the reason you've given is not valid. We have a huge caseload in different courts. Well, of course, courts accommodation is important. We need hardware to proceed, of course. But my question is on principal magistrate. Are you going to continue to freeze this post? Ms. Lau, thank you. Madam Chair, thank you. Mr. Leung, for your question. At different magistracies, the principal magistrate is responsible for dealing with listing matters and allocation of cases to different courts. The post is frozen because, as I mentioned just now, we only have seven magistracies. So operationally, we need only 7 principal magistrates. So, but if the principal magistrate doesn't deal with listing of cases, the principal magistrate can also hear cases. It's true that principal magistrates can also hear cases, but sometimes the magistrates may be on leave. At the magistracy's level, you can ask a magistrate to take up that case and hear the case. And that means we can fully utilize the hardware. Well, my mother was a domestic helper and some working in government, and when she was on leave, there would be a stand-in. Ms. Lau, that depends on the operational need. For example, for the chief magistrate, sometimes the chief magistrate would preside in the different magistrates' court to assist in the hearing of cases. After the West Kowloon Law Courts building has been commissioned, we considered that where necessary, the post of the principal magistrate would be unfrozen to help hear cases in the West Kowloon Law Court building. Well, Mrs. Ip, in short, I think we need I need some spare hands, because even for clerical staff, when those staff members are on leave, there will be stand-in arrangements. So I think that it is unreasonable, unless you suggest that the relieving JJO would undermine the judicial independence. Well, we are already doing what Mr. Leung has just suggested, because when there is a huge caseload in a particular magistrate's court, we arrange for a magistrate to sit in that law court building to take up cases. And we have this floating arrangement. The magistrate may be deployed to another law court, and where we have a peak of cases, we do have a mechanism of seconding magistrates to another magistrate's court. We do have a close watch of the situation in terms of manpower deployment to cope with the demand, and we have regularly reviewed the situation. In essence, we are doing what you've suggested. All right, understood. Let's recruit one more JJO. We've spent 2 hours in discussing this paper. Are there any other questions? If there aren't, I put this paper to a vote. Will those in favor please raise your hands? Those against, please raise your hands. Yes. Do we need to go through the Finance Committee? I haven't announced the result. Be patient. No objection. The paper endorsed. Do we need separate voting at the Finance Committee? Yes. All right, separate voting. Thank you for attending. Next item in relation to the Fire Services Department. The Fire Services Department has proposed to create a senior principal executive officer to be offset by the deletion of the post of PEO, that is D2 replaces D1, with immediate effect upon approval of the Finance Committee to cope with the increased complexity of work of the post holder and to strengthen the support for the senior management of the department. And on the 11th of April 2017, the administration consulted the security panel of the Legislative Council. We have attending the public officers attending this item. Mr. Vic Yao, Deputy Secretary for Security, Mr. Alex Chan, PAS for Security, Mr. Joseph Leung, Deputy Director of Fire Services, and Ms. Carrie Young, Departmental Secretary of FSD.
Since the chairman of the security panel, Mr. Gary Chan, is not a member of this subcommittee, he could not attend today's meeting. I will briefly outline the salient points of the panel discussion. And at the meeting on the 11th of April, the security panel discussed the proposal to upgrade the post of departmental secretary at the Fire Services Department. Members generally support the proposal of upgrading the principal EO post to senior principal executive officer. Over the course of discussion, some members are concerned whether the grading of the departmental secretary is established according to the government department's establishment and how the post is to be filled. The administration replied that the grade of the departmental secretary would be based on the duties and complexity of the post, and the Civil Service Bureau will adopt a long-standing deployment policy and arrange the post to be filled. The administration said that with regards to questions on the difference in annual average staff costs of SEO and PEO, the relevant information has been included in the paper of the ESC in the footnote to paragraph 14. Two members are waiting to speak. First, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, first round. I support the FSD's establishment proposal. This amendment, this change is relatively minor. The PEO post would be replaced by a senior PEO post. There are two main tasks to the senior PEO, and that is to oversee the administration division, official language division, etc., and to establish manpower policy in order to implement the government's new measures. This post is crucial because manpower is the biggest asset of the FSD. Of all the discipline services, the FSD has the second largest establishment. But I don't think the public would find that the establishment too big, because the FSD is very important. Their job is beyond firefighting. The FSD also has to identify fire hazards and enhance fire safety in Hong Kong in a strategic manner. So there's no reason to object to such minor change. In some areas of work, apparently the FSD is unable to meet public needs. And in the current legislative term, we passed the Fire Services Amendment Bill 2016. And the bill provided for third-party fire services engineers, so I won't repeat the justifications here. They cover administrative work currently taken up by the FSD, including fire safety assessment, ventilation systems, as well as the vetting of fire services equipment. After the passage of the bill, there would be registered fire services engineers to take up the work. Before the actual implementation, we have to set up certain regulations, and there would be it would be subject to negative vetting at LegCo, and the trade welcomes the proposal, and future service providers also welcome the proposal. But during this transitional period, the trade told me that the current vetting work has been slow, and it takes half a year for applications to be vetted. I'm not sure if this is the case, but if so, you have to come up with ways to improve during this transitional period. And such work might be somewhat related to this post, because it involves outsourced services. I wonder which posts in the department would take up the regulation of registered fire services engineers. Mr. Yao, thank you very much for the support. As for the future registered fire services engineer system, we are undergoing legislation. After amending the main legislation, we are drafting subsidiary legislation, and it will be scrutinized at LegCo later. In terms of manpower, we have to wait till the registered FSC scheme is in place. Some services can be taken up by third-party fire services engineers, but as for the fire risk assessment and services provided, the FSD would carry out vetting. So we have to wait till the scheme is in place for some time before we can conduct a review. You talked about existing services provided by the FSD. In terms of manpower and efficiency, I would hand over to Mr. Leung, Deputy Director. Mr. Leung, the scope of our service is very wide. According to the Registered Fire Services Engineer Ordinance, in the first phase, the RFEs would provide services related to licenses, and the Dangerous Goods Division would take up the work at the moment. As to which unit will take up the regulation on RFEs, we plan to delegate to the licensing division. Dr. K.K. Kwok. In paragraph 13 of the paper, and it cites a number of issues at the FSD at the moment, which is highly undesirable. I appreciate the efforts of frontline FSD officers because they risk their lives to serve the public and fight fires. However, the FSD's work has been questionable. For example, the purchase of subpar fire jackets and ambulance services have been substandard as well. And they ignored key issues such as identifying the best hospitals, and this is a disgrace to the FSD. You are upgrading the post from D1 to D2. I'm not against this, but what is the justification? Why would upgrading a post help improve the or avoid the administrative blunders by the FSD? I think the management or directorate staff are to be blamed. How can we do better? If we have a D2 officer, doesn't mean that the bad decisions of the director or assistant directors be improved. Who can take this question? The manpower proposal is based on the larger establishment of the department, and as a member has said, we have the second largest establishment within all discipline units and the third largest among all government departments. And with the support, we filed this proposal. And there's an actual need in terms of daily operation, financial arrangements, complexity of work of the FSD. That is why we need a relatively experienced colleague to take up the work. As for the other issues mentioned, I think I'm afraid we can only respond if you are more specific. So do you want me to more specific on, for example, the wrong purchases on fire safety gear? Deputy Director, when we procure protective equipment, we would follow international standards, and the procurements would be made after extensive tests on frontline officers. The protective equipment we purchase are the best forms of protection given to fire safety staff. So we would follow these established procedures. Some members queried whether the clothing was most appropriate. Some frontline officers might ask whether the protective clothing is too hot. So we have tried to identify protective clothing which is more breathable, but we have not identified suitable alternatives yet in terms of safety and comfort. By upgrading the post to a senior PEO, would it necessarily improve the FSD's work? I have nothing to add. Some members might feel that there's further room for improvement. Or under the proposal, we have seen the complexity of work of the FSD as well as the increase in establishment size. Taking reference to other government departments, we feel that a more senior staff is warranted. Mr. Nathan Law, 1 minute. First round. The FSD is a popular department among the public. It ranks top among all discipline forces, and the FSD has faced scarce resources. And we look forward to more discussions with you, and we hope that the FSD can provide even better services. Firemen do not just have to take care of firefighting or rescue work, they have to take up a lot of administrative duties as well. And this post involves financial resources, HR management, as well as accounting work. And the main reason for the upgrading is the increase in complexity of the work. And I know this very well because I have a number of friends who work for the FSD, and their administrative workload is very heavy.
Not only are they required to take up firefighting, I understand that they also reluctantly take up administrative duties. So perhaps you can tell us what is wrong with the administration culture. I have a number of questions. I have a similar question as Dr. Kwok. Why is it that instead of creating another post, you promote this post? You mentioned that the expansion has been substantial, but I want to know whether this proposal can meet your demand. If you want to create posts, then you will have the support of this subcommittee. Now, previously, we asked some questions about the Generation 3 dispatch system. You sought funding to upgrade the system. You spent $700 million, but this system is flawed. We question whether that it is money well spent, because according to the audit report, there are 800 serious incidents, and also 30% of the cases. In 30% of the cases, the system could not be replaced or repaired in less than 6 hours. So, won't you need more resources to deal with these problems? Third question about government's culture. According to the frontline firefighters, for example, in some corridors of residential buildings, the owners may add metal grills. And also for tables and chairs put in the open space of the restaurants. Very often these problems are passed on to the fire services department. And according to the frontline firefighters, this is the government's culture. When you talk about increased complexity of duties, of course, a change of circumstance may be one factor, but it seems that it is also the government's culture to pass the buck to the fire services department. I'd like to speak on behalf of the frontline FSD staff, and you can tell us if assistance is required. Well, Mr. Law, you are airing the grievances of frontline firefighters. I understand that, but your point has nothing to do with this proposal of promoting the post from D1 to D2. My focus is on question 3. Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Law, for acknowledging the work of the FSD. About the creation of posts, apart from upgrading this post, in the past, in light of change of duties of the FSD and the change of circumstances, we have been creating posts, and this year we have created 300 new posts. With increase in the establishment of the FSD, we need to upgrade certain posts, just like the proposal on this occasion. In the future, if necessary, we'll further increase or create posts. About the Generation 3 dispatch system, as per the audit report's recommendations, our department has given them careful thoughts, and where necessary, we have followed up on these recommendations. About the third generation system, it has almost reached when it reaches the end of its service life, we will strive for funding approval from LegCo for G4 dispatch system. Finally, on government culture and coordination among departments, the general response is that indeed the FSD has its professional duties, but the government as a whole requires coordination among departments. For example, in terms of licensing matters, apart from the FSD, other departments also have a role to play. For example, fire service inspections, the FSD also plays a role, and this is the purview of the FSD. We have Mr. Leung Kwok Hong waiting to speak. First round, Mr. Roy Kwong, first round. Dr. Kwok Ka-ki, second round. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. About the creation of this post, item 3 of the main duty is to advise the senior management on the application of civil service policies and government regulations affecting civil servants, to oversee the administration of recruitment, promotion, employment terms and benefits, establishment control, etc. I won't read out the rest. Well, we have 4 discipline services in Hong Kong. The Fire Services Department is snubbed. Well, the police may be beaten up and killed by thieves, and the firefighters may die in fire rescue operations, and this is force majeure. Let's take a look at the forest fires. Well, I do have something to say about point 3. In general, the pay scale for fire services officers is lower than the police, and they also need to work overtime. They have 50 hours of working every week, and there are also 3 principles without compromising the work, etc. So it's like what the Shakespearean quote. When it comes to the third major duty and responsibility, the immediate superior is a deputy director. But what about staff morale? The ambulance service made submissions many times in this council, and Mrs. Ip strongly supported Mr. Watt. And we waited so many years, and you're now using the contract working hours, 51 hours, and that's it. So what's your question, Mr. Leung? I'm asking about point 3. Can this be done? Will this post be able to reflect these unreasonable points? Would you let the department answer? My question is, first of all, have you conducted any consultation on staff of the Fire Services Department at different ranks? Have you conducted any, have you prepared any estimates? And also, have you compared the work of the FSD with the private sector? Let's say you work for 51 hours, and then in return you get 4 hours of time off, because the government is so mean. Who would take the question? Deputy Secretary. Assessment, consultation, and lateral comparison, whether any company is as mean as the government. These are three clear questions. Coming back to this manpower proposal, we propose to upgrade the post of PEO to SPEO. Exactly because we understand the increase in complexity of the work of FSD, and also we have more financial resources. We hope that we can have a post of a rank more senior than the previous one. Well, let's cut it short. Will you conduct an investigation or to hear views in this council? You're going to do it. Second point, assessment. How are you going to assess it? Next point, consultation. How was the consultation done? Can you give me something in writing? Are you going to consult the views of all electoral members? Because we approve funding. Consulting the Legislative Council is important. That is why, first of all, in terms of this proposal, we went through the panel. No, I'm asking consulting each electoral member. I'm Leung Kwok Hong. Can I be the first one to express my views? Because, hey, aren't you listening to the members who will approve your funding application? Because let's say if we approve your funding to deal with the 51-hour issue and to give you a pay rise, please help yourself. Approach me and also the other members. Anything to add? Like I said just now, we are consulting the Legislative Council on this upgrading of the post. I mean, individually, we should be consulted. Mr. Roy Kwong, first round. Madam Chair, the FSD has applied for funding with electrical, and this will be equivalent to the post of a Deputy Director, responsible for the Deputy Director of Fire Services. And we salute the FSD because of the work you do for the community. When it comes to a pay rise or more resources, you have the support of the council. It will be more convincing than giving resources to other discipline services. Now, for point 3 of the major duties and responsibilities, this post will advise the senior government on the application of civil service policies and government regulations affecting civil servants, and also to oversee administration of recruitment, promotion, etc. And a lot of views have been aired in relation to the 6 disciplined services. The police is on top of other general discipline services. It may have to do with some historical reason. We'd like the department to explain to us as well, because for the starting salary of the fireman is 19,780, whereas for a police constable 20,410. Well, if you want to create this post of a deputy director, no, Mr. Roy Kwong, not creating the post of a deputy director. No, I know it's to upgrade the post. I think one issue is to understand how the recruitment is done. If you want to upgrade this post, I'd like to know a number of things. First, are you going to provide better benefits to the new recruits by raising the pay? And also for the emergency discipline service and the general emergency service, any ideas on that? If the FSC remains to be a general discipline service, will you do something to prove that you work on an emergency basis and that your grading should be brought on a par with the police? Deputy Secretary, I thank Mr. Roy Kwong for his acknowledgement of the FSD's work and his support in terms of the starting salary for FSD staff. I understand that the staff union has been discussing the salary points for the grade in general, and also they have come up with some recommendations. I understand that the recommendations have been forwarded to the Civil Service Bureau. When it comes to pay and benefits, it has to do with the overall civil servants policy, so it's for the CSB to consider. But where necessary, in considering the recommendations, if the Bureau is required to comment on the recommendations, we will do so. Well, it's for your sake because the frontline firefighters are already having a hard time, but I don't know that in fact the Fire Services Department is just a general discipline service. In the past, some firefighters lost their lives in the rescue operations. So one of the main duties of this post is about recruitment and benefits, and I think he should also review the status of the FSD. If it can be proved that the FSD should obtain the emergency status among the 6 discipline services, then you should be able to raise your starting salary. I just want to put this on record, because this is the opportunity for us to have a dialogue. When you ask us for resources, I also ask the community. We understand the contribution made to the community by the FSD. You deserve more dignity. You should enhance your status as the emergency discipline service.
Anything to add? Yes, we understand this point. As we said, if a recommendation involves salaries, then it would fall under the ambit of the Civil Service Bureau. Thank you. Well, the first round, Dr. Edward Yu. Thank you. The paper focuses a lot on the increased workload. But it could not explain why the post has to be upgraded. So I wonder if they can explain why they wouldn't opt for the creation of a new post instead of upgrading this post in the Finance Committee paper. It says a senior PO would have more administrative experience, but I believe that the post would be the existing PO would be promoted to a senior PO. So I just wonder why you wouldn't create a new post instead of upgrading this post. Thank you very much. The creation of this new post is, or the upgrading of this post is due to the increasing complexity and workload. And we also took reference from other government departments of comparable size. And we felt that the grading of this post should be elevated. And if we hire an extra executive officer, then the amount of public money required would be even higher. Having considered the issue, we felt that upgrading the existing posts can overcome the issues. Apart from this directorate change, if more manpower is required, we would also make arrangements. If the PEO is upgraded to senior PEO, then a redeployment in the civil service would be required. And the executive officer is a general post, and the CSP would be responsible for the deployment. You are only retitling the post. Is there actually any increase in the directorate establishment? The answer is no. We had one post, and in the future we will still only have one post. The post will be upgraded from D1 to D2. So that was exactly my question. The paper talked about the increase in workload, but the solution, your solution, is not to increase manpower, but to upgrade an existing post. And you are not filling the existing void. So in the paper focuses on the increased workload. Perhaps you need to justify yourselves why this is the case. The overall workload of the department has increased, the complexity of work also increased, and there are various manpower and financial issues to deal with. The administration division has to coordinate various administrative issues, so the work has become more complicated. So if we have a more experienced officer at this post, then it would certainly help. For inspections by frontline officers, if there's an extra workload, then we might need to hire extra officers, but that's another issue altogether. Today we are dealing with a crucial post within the FSD. With the increased workload of the FSD, we feel that the officer in charge of the division needs to be more experienced. Hopefully I could get the message across. First round, 1 minute. Mr. HN, we support the FSD's work. So we have supported the FSD's manpower and manpower recruitment and hardware procurements, and we actually hope that they can try to secure more resources. I have a few questions. First of all, the departmental secretary is not a fireman, but rather a civil servant within the establishment, which can be deployed by other departments, right? Yes, this is an executive officer, grade officer, and she is not part of the discipline force. And EOs are deployed to various government departments to take up administrative and other work. So they belong to the general services. Do other or our other assistant directors belong to other ranks? So in other words, this is the most senior non-fire services grade, right? For assistant director administration, does he or she have a background in fire services? We have no such post. After this post is upgraded, we would call her an assistant director administration. So the AD administration is the only post without a fire services background, correct? The scope of work includes HR management, benefits, and manpower, etc. So a member has compared the benefits and remuneration of Fire Services Department and other discipline forces. I'm more concerned about the internal differences, and I've received comments from the ambulatory staff of the FSD. We are not trying to slash your equipment budget, but we just want to bring certain messages across. The ambulatory staff has received subpar benefits, for example, short lunch hours, and for first aid staff, if their benefits are to be enhanced, they might need to form a separate department from the FSD. So for the future assistant director, will she review the unfair benefits on firemen and first aid staff? Thank you. Within the department, we meet staff representatives as well as workers' unions regularly. So as for the concerns of the workers' unions, we have always dealt with them. For the lunch hour of first aid staff, in recent years, we spent substantial resources and we changed our system. And in terms of lunch hour arrangements, they have improved substantially for first aid staff. In our day-to-day operation, they can enjoy a maximum of 2.5 hours. And this is not the case for other grades. And they are often dispatched, and if they cannot enjoy a lunch hour due to dispatch, we have other measures in place to compensate for it so that they have at least half an hour. And this is exclusive among other discipline services. We want to strike a balance between staff welfare and emergency services, and we will continue our efforts. Sometimes not even us get half an hour of lunch. Mr. Yu Si-wing. And more manpower has been deployed in the past 10 years or so. And the number of audit units has increased from 113 to 138, so manpower would be enhanced accordingly compared with other discipline services. Since the administration division manages such a large force, I wonder if the rank or scope of responsibility be proportional. Is there any room for improvement compared with other discipline forces? And this would facilitate better management in the future. Deputy Secretary, thank you very much for the support. The treatment has been comparable when we compare ourselves with the other departments of similar establishment. The administration division of each department might be slightly different, so it's not completely apple to apple. eventually we have to look at the needs of specific departments, and if needed, adjustments would be made. So at the end, we would look at the needs of each department. Why are you making this proposal only now? The FSD has developed rapidly in recent years. Would this exercise lead to more manpower for the administration division? Mr. Yao. I will try to explain the timing. The FSD has a long history and in recent years, well, years ago we felt that a D1 post was adequate, but with the expansion of the FSD, we feel there's a need to review this post. So that's why we are submitting this proposal. Would there be extra manpower at the administration division? The proposal focuses on the departmental secretary. But as for the overall manpower needs of the department, we would carry out reviews and we would make adjustments if needed. For directorate staff, electrical approval is needed. In the past, there have been increases in the size of the administration division. Now we are at about 130. The admin division has a heavy workload in that it has to take up work, including recruitment.
And if it's necessary to increase the size of establishment of the division, we'll also seek help from the CSB. So at present, the proposal is to upgrade the post, whereas the establishment will not be expanded. There will not be further recruitment. Is that the case? Thank you. We have annual review on the manpower need and see where if there is a need to increase manpower. This is a long-term exercise, but today's proposal is only about upgrading the post of the PEO. No follow-up question. Second round, Dr. KK Kwok. Madam Chair, I think that we're all concerned about the Fire Services Department. We want nicer treatment for the frontline staff. Much of the criticism made just now had to do with management issues with the senior ranks, and about point 3 of the major duties and responsibilities. It is said that there is formulation of staff management plans, etc., and there is also a standardized management of manpower resources. Well, just now, no matter how the administration tried to explain the issue, there are grievances from the frontline staff, and over the years, we haven't seen any major improvement. If there are ways to resolve the issue, of course, we'll be very supportive. But let's say if this post is upgraded to D2 at the title of Assistant Director, I'd like to know whether, in terms of government policies, several issues outstanding can be addressed, including the pay and benefits for frontline staff. If this post is upgraded to D2, then more or less it may help improve the undesirable culture within the FSD, or even reverse such a culture. Yes, my general response is that Dr. KK Kwok referred to a paragraph in the paper. The FSD is a large establishment, and there are administrative issues such as leave management, acting arrangements, etc., that should regularly be reviewed for improvement. Now, about the upgrading of the post under the administrative division, how department-wide we can improve things. I don't think it's easy to point to any specific details, but when it comes to the management of the admin division, apart from dealing with administrative matters and resource management as set out in the paper, the post is also responsible for advising the senior management on the policies and regulations. And this post will be taken up by an executive officer grade, and this officer will have experience in a lot of other departments. Then if this post is upgraded to senior PEO, the person taking up the post will have rich experience in different departments. And we believe that when it comes to advising the senior management of the FSD, the quality of the advice will be better. And in our view, to have a more experienced senior PEO to take up this post will help improve management of the department in the future. I don't think you've answered my question. I asked whether some undesirable policies can be reversed. It's a yes or no question. If upgrading the post cannot solve the problem, my next question is how can we solve the problem? Because even by upgrading the post from D1 to D2, it won't solve the problem. It's Mr. Yao, the Deputy Secretary. Alright, sorry. Anything to add? I don't have much to add, but I think that if members could suggest ways to improve the department, we can have a more specific discussion. My question is whether the problem can be solved just by upgrading the post from D1 to D2. I have nothing much to add, but like I mentioned, upgrading the post would help improve the management of the department in general. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, first round. Thank you, Madam Chair. According to the paper, this post will be upgraded. But this paper doesn't explain how the upgraded post will deal with the increased workload. So my question is this. Workload is so heavy, and you're now proposing only to upgrade the post from D1 to D2. I want to know whether there will be corresponding supporting staff due to the upgrade. Second question. After promoting the post from D1 to D2, the post is supposed to provide advice to important institutional matters. I want to know what it refers to, because as far as the FSD is concerned, our understanding is that it must be to do with fire services and ambulance service. So can you tell us what you mean? And by upgrading the post from D1 to D2, what is the relevance in terms of the duties of this post? Well, in terms of the major or the huge workload, this is about the upgrade of a directorate post, and we are applying for funding because of that in this council. At the same time, we are also reviewing manpower needs in different in the department. For example, this year for non-directorate posts, we have increased some the establishment by 300 posts. Last year, we added 60 plus posts. In future, we will gauge a work demand and increase non-directorate posts. And if directorate posts are involved, we'll apply for funding in this council. And Mr. Wu referred to advising the senior management on major corporate issues. When it comes to operational matters such as firefighting, this may not be what the SPEO can advise on, but in terms of the large department such as the FSD, management is quite a complex issue, and sometimes you may need to liaise with the staff as well as the public. And this head of the administration division at present is taking up the role of a consultant, and I believe that with the upgrade of the post in the future, the work can be further improved. Madam Chair, I think according to him, the work is quite general. Is there anything that cannot be coped with by the D1 post at the moment? Is there any example? DS, any example? Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Wu. I don't think we should interpret this proposal as our belief that the existing post holder cannot cope with the existing duties. Rather, we are visionary in terms of the wider scope of work of the department, and we have also compared the workload with other similar posts in other departments, and this is the recommendation put forward by the Civil Service Bureau. We believe that to be forward-looking, we need a more experienced colleague to take up this post so as to bring greater benefits to this department, and this is the basis of our proposal. Madam Chair, having heard his explanation, I really don't understand the situation. Perhaps I'm not familiar with the operation of the department, but are you suggesting that this post must be equivalent to the post of a department secretary in other departments? And it seems that you are taking preemptive action for problems that have yet to arise. You talked about more responsibilities and duties to be taken up by the post holder, and there will be more issues to be dealt with by the department in the future, and also by comparison with other departments, we need to upgrade the post. I don't quite understand. I think what the DS suggests is that they would do a better job in the future. Let's see if he can come up with a better answer for your benefit. I think, like Madam Chair said, we want to conduct a review. We looked at the operational need of the department, and we also consider the experience of the civil service as a whole before coming up with this proposal. Looking forward, for example, for our ambulance service, we consider the demographic changes in Hong Kong, and we anticipate the workload of the FSD to continue to increase. And we therefore need an experienced post holder in the administration division to bring more benefits to the department. Second round, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Madam Chair, if you refer to enclosure 2 in the paper, the existing and proposed organization chart of the Fire Services Department, this post proposed comes under the administration division. That is to say, the PEO, Principal Executive Officer, would be upgraded to Senior Principal Executive Officer under the Administration Division. So you may be thinking that there is something wrong with the administration of the department because you're not increasing resources for other commands. So for this SPEO, the post holder will take up a lot of administrative duties. And as you mentioned, you have recruited 300 new officers in the FSD. But they are not administrative staff. Is that right? For the 300 additional staff, They're not administrative staff. DS, are they firemen? Mr. Leung's understanding is correct. We're talking about upgrading the post of the PEO to a D2 post as PEO, and as mentioned just now, we have increased 300 posts this year, right, just to make it clear. So we don't have additional staff in the administrative division, but only in other commands. Now you have promoted this post, meaning that the post below will be frozen. So you're just promoting that colleague. Let's say if this post holder now holds greater power, it will be more convenient for the post holder to liaise with other parties, and that's the government's version. Say for the IT bureau, a bureau must be set up or else the government will not be heard. So let's say if the officer is promoted, he leads the same team. Are you suggesting that the staff would be more capable after he's been promoted? But it's unreasonable. It's unreasonable to suggest that if the rooster doesn't sing, the sun will not rise. Well, Mr. Leung asked two questions. First, whether the team is large enough, and also the caliber of the candidate.
Both areas are important, and as we said, is there any increase? Well, we have had an increase in the establishment of the admin division. We have more than 130 people now, with an increase of more than 10%. So for our non-directorate establishment, it has increased in recent years, and in the future it might increase further. So that is the manpower situation. As for the experience and ability of our staff, our proposal address our working needs. If we have a more experienced executive officer, he or she can facilitate the work of the admin division. So my question was, why won't you promote internally? For the other divisions, you all carry out internal promotion. So you're asking the admin division to manage all other commands. Well, this is not the case, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. The D2 officers are all promoted from junior EOs. Well, Mrs. Yip, you have been with the government for a long time. Why can't the FSD train up someone internally instead of this is not a question for me to answer. Dr. K.K. Kwok, third round. Chairman, I hope that this post can solve the problems. But the Deputy Secretary could not convince me. You said that the upgrading of this post can solve your problems, and you have to tell us the specifics. At the police force, apart from administrative and police officer posts, there's also a post to tackle administrative issues. Now you are, apart from this upgrade, you will consider incorporating an AO grade officer in your department. Then this might improve the undesirable issues, and you've been taking around circles, so you are not tackling the problem at all. So this is very strange indeed. With new funds and a new post, the problems are still there. You are still going through the motions. You are asking for an even more senior officer, but the problems are still there. So can you give us more justifications so that we can support you? If you say that this is not the only measure, for example, by recruiting an AO grade officer, would this be something you have considered? You talked about an AO grade officer. It really depends on the department. And some administrative divisions would incorporate AO staff, some EO staff, so it depends on the operational needs of different departments. I think there's room for improvement for the fire services department. According to Dr. Kwok, I think we can have another discussion on certain issues. We feel that upgrading the departmental secretary at the admin division can improve matters. So in what ways can matters be improved? What kind of logic is this? Can you elaborate on this? We have reviewed the complexity of work and the size of establishment, and we felt that a more experienced EO should take up this post. As to why a D2 officer might be better than a D1 officer, for departments of substantial size, their admin divisions would be headed by directorate officers. And we would imagine that D2 officers are likely to have experience at heads of other admin divisions in other departments. So he or she can bring such experience to the FSD. Third round, Mr. Lam Kwok Hong, 3 minutes. The establishment grew by 50% over the last 20 years. So this is a substantial growth. You said that some extra manpower alone would not be enough. You have to enhance strategic thinking and management. You are upgrading the post from D1 to D2. Are you going to have the same officer, or do you have a big talent pool in D2? That's why you want a D2 post. This has been answered, right? Deputy Secretary, if the post is upgraded to D2, is this the same person? Another D2 officer would be deployed. If you incorporate someone new into a discipline force, and there's the problem with teamwork. And the existing officer has been here for so long, and she should be promoted. It takes time to teeth. You know, even for the new legislators, it takes a year to accommodate to this environment and learn how to carry out their work, etc. I think you should have a 1+1 arrangement. No, I don't mind giving you more funds. You know, this is nothing compared with the white elephants. You said you want to go for someone with more administrative experience. You are not going to demote the experienced officer, and you are sending in someone new. Chairman, I think you should not be chairman. You should be a member and give your views. You are going to criticize me if that's the case. You must have a 1+1 arrangement if you really want to make something happen. No, I cannot see the benefits of your proposal. There's no point debating this. But you have to explain yourself to the people of Hong Kong. Deputy Secretary, Mr. Leung talked about the option of internal promotion, but very often the admin divisions of government departments will be taken up by general grade staff. They have the relevant experience, and even though they are not firefighters, they know what firefighting is about. They have experience with the relevant commands, so it takes time to immerse in the environment. So the staff must be immersed in the environment for a period of time. Your time's up, Mr. Leung. Chairman, can you become a member again and give your views? I can take your chairmanship for a while. Mr. Leung, we have dwelled on this issue for a long time. We still have a few papers to go. We must end at 12:30 today. This has nothing to do with me because we have a vice chairman as well. So why isn't the vice chairman here? No, I have another meeting to catch as well. Mr. Leung, do you have other questions? Because I have to draw the line here. I do not like it if Mr. Watt is not here today. If you do not promote internally, how can you manage the first aid staff? I'm not convinced. Perhaps you can object to the proposal if you do not like it. Does any other members have questions? If not, I will put the item to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. Are you calling for a division? I request the relevant officers to give answers. I will come to that later. Any objections? In favor, we had 4. Those against? No one. The item is passed. Do we need a separate voting? So it will be voted on separately at the Finance Committee. I will take a 5-minute break.